Drew, it's fantastic to have you here.
Hey, good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So, we were talking a little earlier, and I understand that as an intelligence officer, you actually were deployed to the Middle East somewhere around 40 times, which I find to be, I was saying good genes, right? You're looking like a young man for that. But let's talk Middle East. I think that we could say that that ISIS has been defeated, right? Would you agree with that? And if you agree, can you explain to me how the current policies actually affected something which seemed impossible 2 years ago?
Yeah, I think that they are in a true sense of the form, like they're defeated. But with that, we've also got to be careful. We've seen this happen before. We're very quick in the government to declare victories and focus on one thing, and a new shiny ball pops up, and we move on to that, and we abandon these other issues. So I would say yes, ISIS in its truest form and what we know them to be is defeated. Are remnants of ISIS still alive? Absolutely. Are they going to start different splinter groups and faction groups? Absolutely. So I think there's a big concern there. But where the difference really came in to getting to the stage where we are now is when this whole thing started. ISIS takes over Mosul in 2014.
Right.
The intel community had seen it coming, but we had abandoned Iraq. For all intents and purposes, we'd abandoned Iraq. Left there, created this vacuum. They come in and take it. And the Iraqi soldiers and intel officers and everyone that we'd worked with and trained, sadly, just aren't that strong of a force. They're not that good of a group. The Kurds, different story. The Kurds are amazing to work with. But we created this, and then at the time, President Obama, and this is not to make it political, but it's just truthful, the focus was all air campaign only. So what we saw, and you can't do that, you've always got to have a multi-pronged effort. Obviously, an air campaign on its own is great, but this gave them the opportunity to establish their cities and their hubs, Mosul and Raqqa, and They were able to do that. They were able to booby trap places, create these scenarios that would eventually make it very, very difficult for invading forces to come in. It also, by the way, festered this huge refugee crisis, because when you don't have boots on the ground, you don't have intel on the ground saying, hey, we want to keep Americans out, you lose control of the situation. So you've got huge amounts of people leaving for obvious reasons. Their cities are being taken over, but you've also created the opportunity for then ISIS fighters to integrate themselves into that crowd and move into Europe, which created a really, really difficult problem for us in terms of fidelity of the situation, known actors. It just gets to be such a big problem. So when it changed, to answer your question like 85 minutes later, when it changed is we came in and we were able to put boots on the ground and say, hey, what do you need, commanders, whether on the intel side or the military side, to get rid of this threat? And we were able to say, hey, we don't need a huge 100,000 troop base. We just need the amount of people that it takes to execute the mission, special operations, intel, support, logistics, and let us rip. And that's where things really started to turn and go our way.
That was one of the things that I heard, that basically, President Trump took the kind of handcuffs off of the military, and they were able to actually do their job. Is that how you read it?
100%. I think, talking even now, I've been out now for just over 2 years, and talking to colleagues who are still there and involved. Obviously, they can't share everything because it's classified, but I saw it towards the end. The cuffs coming off is just a huge thing, and it was a very real thing under the previous administration. There were so many things that we could not do anymore. Hey, you're here in Afghanistan, you're here in Iraq, you're here in the Horn of Africa to eradicate extremists, but you can't actually do anything to do it. It got very, very frustrating. It was one of the reasons in the end, beyond being gone 6 to 9 months a year and not seeing my family, that I was like, all right, it's someone else's turn to do this because we can't do our job. So.
I see. So there was a big morale issue, basically.
Absolutely. I mean, we got to the point
on top of not actually being able to do the work, in your view.
I remember, President Karzai, who we had put in power in Afghanistan, wins his next term, and towards the end started to get confident and started to feel like I can make decisions and stand up to big bad America. And it got to the point where we would cave and concede to them despite all the money. And not to say that their opinions and ideas don't matter, they certainly do. There's great people over there. But it got to the point where you're at the end and some of our special operations troops, some of our intel forces that people don't know about are out there trying to do their job, but would have to call out before going into attack a home. And these are people who have equipment that they want to destroy.
To be allowed to do what they wanted to do.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're going to raid a house, instead of just kicking the door in and utilizing surprise, which always helps us, and that's what the special operations community uses, it was, hey, a loudspeaker, we're here, we're coming to get you, which gives them, of course, time to arm themselves, destroy cell phones, computers, set explosives, whatever the case might be, and it was a game changer. And then on top of that, we were never able to hold anyone. So you'd capture someone, and literally sometimes before you got back to the base, you'd get a call and say, hey, you got to cut this person loose for XYZ political reason. So it got very, very frustrating.
And then you hadn't actually assessed the threat of that person properly at that point. Is that what you mean? Or?
Well, no, it means that they had enough political clout to call in a favor that reached back to our folks at base and or DC, who said, we're not willing to take that.
Oh, so you even when you would know that this person's a problem.
They were bad people. There's no reason you're going to get them, if they're not bad people. But, Wow. So people are getting cut loose. You end up arresting the same people multiple times over and seeing them cut loose only to say, I know we're going to be going after this guy again in a few weeks. And so it gets very frustrating. But that has changed. You're starting to see a lot more aggressive policies and procedures out of this current administration, which is allowing the intel and military forces to go do what they're there to do.
Well, and what about the pullout from Syria? I guess we know it's not a complete pullout.
Right.
There was again a lot of discussion, maybe even deliberate kind of keeping everyone on their toes.
Yep.
How do you read that situation?
It's a good question. It's tricky. I think we're doing what we should do there, in the sense that, first of all, I think we're always way too public in announcing and decreeing what we're going to do when it comes to our national security. Like, guys, there used to be a time where no one knew what we were doing, and it really helped us. So I think it's good that folks are coming out in terms of the optics. It is very complicated there. It's a very tricky situation when you've got the Kurds, you've got different rebel groups fighting, you've obviously got Assad's folks, you've got Russia involved, you've got so many people involved, which can lead to such bigger problems if you have an event where you've got the wrong people killing the wrong people. But I think doing it that way, the way we did it in Iraq when President Trump came in, and the way that we're doing it now in Syria, where you've got a small footprint, you're able to execute the mission. I think that the misnomer is people get caught up in, we need whatever the figure is, 5, 10, 15, 30,000 troops to get this job done. When we were most successful in Afghanistan and other places, it's a small footprint. It's striking fear into the enemies that, the Americans are here, and I'm not going to sleep well tonight because there's enough of them that I know that they're coming for me. So having a small footprint works. It reduces, obviously, the level of collateral, and you can just move so much more agile. So I think it's good what he's doing. Obviously, the details matter. The follow-up on, do we pull everyone out of Iraq? Does that number keep going down in Syria? You can't just abandon the area, because that creates huge problems, and it's going to be an issue in Afghanistan as well. There has to be a follow-on plan, or you need to be able to just say, hey, we don't care anymore, which is a bad policy, because then you've created a safe haven for them. So we'll see, but I think he's making the right moves to date. The next steps will be critical.
Okay, very interesting. So, Drew Berquist, you have a show on Blaze TV.
I do.
So tell me a little bit about your show.
So I like to think of it kind of like late night news. We're serious. We've got, at OpsLens, the company that I run, over 70 contributors, all prior intel, law enforcement, military. So our big thing is experience. So we bring them, as well as other folks on as guests, to talk about serious issues, but we also take a trip across the headlines, go through the day's biggest stories, and provide perspective on them, but we're also sarcastic and fun with it. So it's you're going to get some humor, you're going to get some seriousness, you're going to get a little bit of everything.
Not the boring thing like this interview.
No, this is fun. But no, it's just a different way to consume it. You'll get some laughs. There might be minutes where we're laughing too hard to talk, but we have a good time.
Fantastic. So what time can we catch this?
It's every night, 8 p.m. on Blaze TV.
Fantastic. That's Eastern, I guess.
Eastern,
right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Eastern.
Fantastic. Well, Drew Berquist, fantastic to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.